Hi everyone, it's Amina Zhaman, Art Director of International Filmmaker Festival of New York. Today I will talk to a British filmmaker, Adam Scarborough. He won an award for an outstanding achievement in documentary with his wonderful work titled Spring in Chigwell. I can't wait to talk to Adam and ask my questions about making of Spring in Chigwell. So, Adam, we are waiting for you. Before Adam joins, I want to say to our viewers that he won an award at New York Neil Gallery in January and had a screening at the Chinese Theater. Actually, so I can't wait to learn more about that event, and he will tell the way it was.
Hello,
Yes!
last.
Hey!
I'm sorry, sorry about that. Oh, God.
Hi,
Um,
happy to see you. Talk
yeah.
to
Can you
you.
hear me now?
Yes, the
Oh,
sound is.
great.
We see,
Yeah, that's good.
we hear you. So,
Um,
Adam, first of all, congratulations on winning an outstanding achievement in documentary award at IFFNY.
Thank you so much, Amina. It's nice to be back here again. I'm sorry about the technical issues earlier. Never trust technology. Yeah.
You never trust technology and psychiatrists, right?
Oh, oh, yeah, you heard that. You saw that. Yeah, indeed. Oh, absolutely. You know how to tell if there's something wrong with your psychiatrist. If you tell him you're Napoleon and he tells you to get a white horse and invade Russia, definitely change your psychiatrist. 100%.
So that video
Yeah.
you from New
Yeah,
York.
it's great. It's great to be back again. Is it just you and me on this call, is it, or is it others joining
Yes,
us?
it's me
Right,
and you. We'll talk
right.
about
Yeah, yeah,
project
yeah,
at Spring in Chigwell.
yeah. It was great to have my this project in Manhattan because I'd set it was about William Penn who went to Chigwell Boys' School in Essex and was born in Walthamstow, and the state of Pennsylvania was named after William Penn. And considering Pennsylvania is not too far away from New York, I thought it'd be a good project, and I think that's part of the reason that they chose my project. Um, William Penn also went up the Delaware River and founded the province of Philadelphia also. So he was an interesting person. He was jailed for a while when he wrote his book No Cross, No Crown. Under the time it was the time of the Puritans, and a lot of the Puritans, the Pilgrim Fathers, were going to America. So I think the part of my inspiration for doing that film was people often think about, don't realize the links, the antiquated links between Britain and America, and the way, like when I was walking around Brooklyn the other day, the romantic thing for me as an English person was 250 years ago, it was like a little English village, probably full of redcoat soldiers getting drunk, waiting to fight George Washington and keep our colonies. So that sounds very romantic, but part of the reason I think they didn't really invite the Queen to go to America was because it used to be part of England a long time ago, and so in 2026 it'll be precisely 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Though the British Army were in New York City, I think up until about 1785.
Mhm.
And if you look around there, you still see some late Georgian architecture from that period in other areas as well, such as Richmond, not too far away.
Mhm.
Um, so in doing Spring in Chigwell, I wanted to make something that was a little bit historical, also with a bit of ecology, and also to try and get some of the beauty of the Essex countryside, with some of the flowers coming into blossom. I thought it would make an interesting project, and to torture people as well, watching it. A little bit of my poetry as well, I threw in there for good measure. And it's a very, very beautiful Essex village if you ever get the chance to visit it, because it's also was Charles Dickens loved Chigwell, and he loved the King's Head pub, which is featured in his novel Barnaby Rudge.
Mhm.
Not one of his better known novels, but I think Chickwell was an inspiration to Charles Dickens as well. Yeah, indeed.
Yes, and I want to say to our viewers that you wrote, directed, composed, and narrated this film. And I
Yeah.
loved your poetry so much. I want to know, when did you start writing poems?
Oh, that's interesting. I started some years ago, in the early 80s. I used to go to a poets club in Earl's Court called the Troubadour. I don't think it was like a nice coffee house, and we used to go under the into the basement and we used to read poetry. So that would have been about 1983 when I was writing that. But these poems I did more recently over the last few years, and I thought they wouldn't really be out of context if I put them in that short documentary. And I think it worked quite well, and for the project, and because I didn't really want to show Chigwell just as a church or just as a village, or I wanted to show the multi sort of factorial side of Chigwell, and that poem I think. Summer Heat of Solar, I wrote one between my work breaks some years ago when I was working at the Royal Free Hospital. I think that was when I wrote that one. So I never realised I put it in the film, and the others I did shorter notice, and I tried to combine it with the Blossom coming out. I thought it would make a nice combination.
Yes, it's a beautiful, poetry. I really loved it, and it's just a addition to the image and to the history lesson you gave us all. It's like being at a class and being almost like in Central Park.
Yeah,
You see a beautiful nature. You learn more about the history of
yeah.
England and United States. William Penn's contribution to say, and it's so interesting and breathtaking. And
Mm.
speaking of Blossom, did you go to Central Park? Considering how
I did. Yeah, I went to Central Park, and I thought about the movies that Woody Allen made up there with Janet Margolin some years ago, and the amount of movies. I think John Lennon used to spend a lot of
yeah,
time there with Strawberry Fields, and I mean, the word Manhattan, I believe, comes from the Manhattan tribe that were there. So, and as a lot of these other beautiful American names are of Native American descent, I believe. So, yeah, I went to Central Park. I walked around there, and New York City at the time of the British occupation would have been fairly a business city, but part of it would have been loyal to the king, and part of it would have still been loyal to George Washington. But what Washington was incredible, really, because he took on the superpower of the day, and what we did was incredible. I'm not proud of it, but to it was only the wind and the sexton that got those ships across to the United States. We didn't have power in those days, like electricity or coal power or anything, and they had like 32 cannons on each side those ships. And I think what Washington did was incredible. And I'm surprised, quite honestly, that more movies haven't been made about the American Revolutionary War, because what's fascinating for me, Amina, about that Revolutionary War, the American War of Independence, is there were no photographs. It was before photography had been invented, so there was no photographs of George Washington. Or the only really connection we've got is a few diaries from redcoat soldiers. The movies I think that were made was Mel Gibson's The Patriot, and also I think it was Irving Winkler's Al Pacino in Revolution, made in the mid 80s, which didn't do too well. And they filmed that in Norfolk. I think that they filmed that in Norfolk. Over here, they didn't film that there. So having my movie shown and walking around in Manhattan was quite magical, considering the history of the place. No one can take that away from you. It's fascinating.
yes, and very, very symbolic. And you need to have a screening in Pennsylvania as well.
Yeah, indeed, Pennsylvania. The name, yeah, it's a long time ago, and there was a lot of persecution, and I think, to be fair to Washington, I think they were not just incredible soldiers, but I think they were intellectuals as well. George Washington and Thomas Paine and Jefferson and all those, they were intellectuals because they protected free speech by law, I think, with the First Amendment, and the Second Amendment, although it's very controversial these days, the right to have guns wasn't just to protect themselves from the British, it was to protect them from future Orwellian governments. So I think George Washington was an intellectual, and he had such a futuristic insight, that man as well. His great grandfather came from the UK. The house is open to the public. I've never actually been there. And to think that there's a connection between Chigwell in Essex and the United States. It's most people who live in the UK don't realise the connection. So it was fascinating.
But now that they can watch your film, they will realize that and will learn more. And when I watched,
Yeah,
it was like watching your personal journey,
yeah,
like a VIP tour to Chigwell,
yeah,
and such a beautiful place. And I really loved, uh, the church. It's so beautiful, just
yeah.
gorgeous. Tell me more about that place. And
That church.
it's
Yeah, St Mary's Church in Chigwell is. They do say that allegedly the bones of King Harold are under there, and we were a dictatorship for 5 years in the 1640s, and there is an underground passageway which goes, or used to go underground, to the King's Head pub, but for some reason it's been blocked off halfway under the road, and they're not sure about that. But it is a very, very picturesque church, even if you're not religious, and very, very colourful. And it goes back, I think, to the 12th century, the original one. There were two parts of it. The original one was what's called the Ladies' Chapel, which is on the right, which had a separate altar. And the separate church was built in the 1700s. The main part was built in the 1700s. And there are some graves that go back to the 1640s. So that church would have been there when we still had British America 250 years ago. And there's also a boys' school there, which is Chigwell Boys' School, quite an exclusive school, a public school where William Penn went to. And I set the documentary mainly around that.
yes, and,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
the part when you said Michelangelo would be proud of that,
Yeah, yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, it always fascinates. I think the movie was with Rex Harrison when when Michelangelo was painted in the Vatican or wherever it was, and the Pope came in and said, "When will you make an end?" He said, "When I'm finished." I might have said that before. And about the film festival itself, the International New York Film Festival was different to others. It was a far more interactive event where we discussed, for example, day two, we had a talk on and a discussion on the impact the soundtracks have in a film. And we came to the conclusion that they do color films in a big way, and they add to, you can have, say, terror, suspense. The music leads up to a particular event, and the music also can be a big part of the continuity. If I think about the episodes of Star Trek, some of those scenes, they've got a background music going all the time. I think music was used more in the silent era, in the silver screen era, because they didn't have talking. So that's why they relied on Charlie Chaplin's antics and also the music. So it was utilized a lot more then, I think. And movies are so good because I think we will also discuss the therapeutic benefit of films and how you can watch a film and you come out feeling better. And that's why I think movies can be surreal. There is the surreal value because if it's too much related, like for example the 9 o'clock news, what's going on in the Ukraine, who wants to see that brutality? Reality can be quite nasty. So if you have a temporary diversion from reality, then I think that's all well and good. And there was a song written by Pete Townsend of The Who, and it was called However Much I Booze. And in that song he said, however much I booze, there ain't no way out. You have to come back to reality. But unlike drugs and alcohol, you can watch a film and you can reflect on life and you can gather your thoughts together. It's a better diversion than drugs and alcohol, I think, a movie. And Chad and Marika, who organised the festival, they also had some interaction with the director after the movie was screened. So it made it a very, very interesting event.
Yes, and the atmosphere at IFFNY is always special. It's so friendly, and all those Q&As after the screenings
Yeah,
and public talks and roundtable discussions are so unique. And I
yeah,
want to say the roundtable discussion was hosted by Castro Zizo, an internationally acclaimed Albanian musician and actor. So he knows a
yeah.
lot about music and
Yeah, I think I
film.
met him. I think I met him.
Very
Yeah, lovely guy. Yeah, and it's a multifactorial art. It's a more of a science than an art. And I think, like, if you look at the James Bond theme, the James Bond music, and the James Bond genre, there was an interview once with Cubby Broccoli, who was the original director of the Bond movies, and he said a lot of the men, when they see Bonds, they fantasy from a fantasy point of view, they see themselves as Bond, so it massages their ego, and I think that's probably true. When you look at Bond, the swashbuckling Bond, and how he gets out of difficult situations, it's a great diversion.
Yes, and I love soundtracks from James
Yeah,
Bond, like
yeah,
Tina Turner did Garbage, Adele.
yeah,
I was waiting for the soundtrack more than I waited for the film itself. So like,
yeah,
who
yeah.
will sing the original soundtrack next? I'm always curious
I
about
love that.
that.
I love those soundtracks because they're so. I think John Barry once described them as $1 billion Mickey Mouse music. I think that was the way John Barry described them. But I think he underestimated, but when John Barry orchestrated the Bond themes, I think it took it to another level. Those movies are known just as well for the music, for the incidental music, and Shirley Bassey's music, and Tina Turner, as you say, they're known just as well. So with Spring in Chigwell, I think the I wanted something that wasn't sort of over the top, but something fairly sort of pretty, a pretty sort of soundtrack, and something that got into the ambience of the area. That's which I think it did to a degree.
Yes, and I loved your cameo in the movie. It's
Yeah, again, yeah, it's
because it's your personal view, on this topic, and the way you tell us the history of this place,
yeah,
so important, and very very special, and the way you tell everything about William Penn,
yeah,
Charles Dickens, and
yeah,
like the amazing places and important facts of history
yeah,
of both countries,
yeah,
UK
yeah.
and you.
I wanted to get a balance. I think, and I think because someone said to me it was too much thrown into it, but I think the balance was quite good. Mainly about William Penn and its connection with America, but I didn't go OTT on that, so I think it worked quite well, and I think it was. Unlike the Hollywood Film Festival, I didn't have to have it converted to a DCP
Mhm.
for the big screen. And to be quite honest, the cinemas we had in 41st Street, it was just as good. It was just as good as the ones we had in Hollywood Boulevard, which I had to pay for. And they did a great job. And I look forward to going back again some stage in the future. I was the only English in entrant there, which I was quite honoured by that. But I found a fantastic combination of music. Movies, different genres. We had one about a nomadic Turkish people. That was I'd like to watch that again. That got an award, and there were comparisons with that and the that film, The Enchanted Forest, I think it was called, which was about the Amazonian Indians and the way society likes to bring them into the 21st century. But these nomadic people, they're happy living by themselves, and it was a great film. And there was another film we had which was about I think was it Bosnia, after the war zone, after the Russian army, and there was an elderly couple living there amongst the devastation quite happily, and that was a beautiful film, and you have to admire that elderly couple that lived there. So and we had the Turkish ambassador there, the Turkish ambassador to the USA. He turned up, so it was a most fascinating 3 days. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yes, I'm so glad, and it's national, and the program is so diverse. You can see different cultures in different
Yeah,
films, and learn more about, each of these cultures, and a wonderful Iranian film,
Yeah.
amazing Turkish film. So you can choose, you have a choice as a viewer, and you want to see as much as possible. And that's what's most important in any film festival: strong and different films.
Yeah.
And speaking of soundtrack, I want to ask which James Bond soundtrack is your favorite? Maybe Die Another Day by Madonna, or GoldenEye by Tina Turner?
Um, for me, I think I've listened to most of them. I always liked Carly Simon's "No One Does It Better." That was very, very good. But for me, the most beautiful soundtrack I think is Shirley Bassey doing "Diamonds Are Forever." That was a beautiful piece of music. I think it was recorded about 3 o'clock in the morning in New York City. It did it, so maybe that gave it a surreal edge. But he did. Shirley Bassey actually did three Bond movies. She did a Goldfinger, Diamonds Are Forever, and she came back in 1979 and did Moonraker. So, and John Barry always complimented her. So, I think on balance, I think my favourite would have been Diamonds Are Forever. The entire soundtrack is just wonderful and takes me back to the early 70s, a different world where things were confident and. Bond was different, I think, under Sean Connery. For me, I liked Roger Moore as James Bond. I think he had that cheeky sort of English, sort of self-deprecating humour that he had. But I think Roger Moore. We used to have another show over here called The Saint, which was what Roger Moore did before Bond, and I think Roger Moore was better suited to The Saint than James Bond. But they've often described Sean Connery as a thug in a dinner jacket. A lot of people may agree with that. But all the soundtracks are good, and up to the present day, with when Piers Brosnan joined, there was a very good soundtrack. Tina Turner on
Golden.
Goldeneye, the first venture for Piers Brosnan. That was a great one as well. Yeah,
So
and we
favorite Bond and favorite soundtrack?
yeah. We also discussed science fiction, the science fiction genre, and how that can show us how we can live. You know, movies like Soylent Green and well, indeed Star Trek. I mean, some of those gadgets are being used today. Captain Kirk's, it was like almost like a premonition that it would become reality at some stage in the future. Um, as for AI, there's been a lot of talk about AI, and I think I don't really like AI because I think it gets away from the human element in making films, and it can. I don't think filmmaking can be that automatic, and I don't think a computer can be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. It can't anticipate what an audience wants. So I think AI, and again, it comes back, if it's that easy, everyone would be doing it. I think you have to have the human element. And if it's just AI, it's too artificial. And it loses everything that's gone before. It would have been like the products of human endeavor, Chaplin and whoever in the evolution of film. But AI, I can't see it taking on two-way because it gets rid of the human element, in my opinion.
Yes, and that there are only a few filmmakers that also compose music for their films. Charlie Chaplin,
Yeah,
not many know that he also composed the music for his films, not just
yeah,
directed and wrote and
yeah,
starred. And
yeah,
also
yeah,
a Turkish filmmaker and writer, Zülfü Livaneli,
yeah,
and Clint Eastwood writes music
yeah.
for
Is
films.
that right? I didn't know that. I didn't know that because with I think Woody Allen did a few. He was a brilliant clarinetist, wasn't he, on that movie Sleeper? He did a very very good
Mm,
job on that. And Woody Allen, I think a friend of mine's worked with him, and he said he's very very modest. And he asked you, was that all right? You know, he's very modest about his abilities. Woody Allen. I'm not sure if he's made anything recently, but my skills or lack of them, shall we say, in writing music is there's so many different ways of doing it, Amina. You know, it's knowing what sort of music fits with the piece. But sometimes if the music is written too much with the film in mind, it can be a bit too banal. So sometimes if it's a little bit incongruent,
mm,
I think that can actually work better. But my dilemma is always whether you should shoot the film first and do the music afterwards,
Mhm.
or do it the other way, do the music first. And the music for me is quite an exhausting side of it because the mixing and everything, and in the ones I've done so far, the music has taken longer than the actual filming
Mhm.
and the editing of the film.
Yes, and actually,
Yeah,
work is very interesting and original. It can be a documentary, and it can also be considered as a music video because you have poetry, lyrics, and music, and also as an installation. It can go as installation.
yeah,
It's so it's a mix of different genres,
yeah,
so it can fit in different categories.
yeah.
So tell me, what are you working on at the moment?
Well, at the moment, I've got the idea for a short comedy. It's probably a little bit politically incorrect. I'm just writing it at the moment.
Mhm.
I may have a small cameo in this film if it ever gets made, because I think I'd be good in that role. But I'll give you a brief insight. It's about two gay
Mhm.
skinheads, and I
Wow.
wanted a particularly English thing, and I was going to try and make it a bit like The Odd Couple. Do you remember that program, the comedy show, The Odd Couple? The
Yes,
Odd Couple
yes.
with,
Oh,
well, I was going to try and make it a bit like The Odd Couple, but on steroids. And but just very, very cam. And like at the moment, I've interviewed one actor. I think he'd be great, but I'm thinking about whether I should have just one of them with a moustache, or if they both have moustaches, then would that be a bit of an overkill? And I think if I can make it long enough, I can turn it into a feature. But whether audiences walk out in disgust, I mean, it's not going to be more offensive than a Monty Python film, or I mean, I think gay people. You get the idea of the average skinhead, very violent. And my friend, I used to know the film director Derek Jarman. You may have heard of Derek Jarman. He's no longer with us. He was a British director, and he did Caravaggio and Shakespeare's The Tempest. Years ago, he took me to a pub. He said it was full of skinheads, and I didn't realise it was full of gay skinheads, and they were like hissing and all that. And I just saw some of the comedy antics, the bitchiness between them, and apparently a lot of those gay pubs in London were shut down because the police were called for violence all the time. But some of the gay people I've worked with over the years, they in their own way, without really realizing it, can be quite funny. So they're either going to try and kill me afterwards, or they're going to find it funny. I don't know,
we'll
but
see.
we've had we've
We'll see about
we've
that.
had comedians in this country like Frank Spencer, who wasn't gay, who was a married. Did you ever see the show Some Mothers Do Have 'Em?
No,
It was like
no.
a comedy show, and we've had Larry Grayson. We've had some very, very camp English comedians who I grew up with. Larry Grayson, Frankie Howard was another one, very, very camp, but a great actor. And in those Carry On movies, there was always some gayness in there. Did you ever see a Carry On film like Carry On Abroad? Well, there was one. Everything in those movies had a double meaning. Like we had an actor in there, Charles Hawtrey, who was very gay. Apparently, he used to wait around for sailors down in Hastings. That will give you an idea. But everything had a double meaning, like oh, I couldn't get my pole up, and it got round censorship. But people found the double meaning, the double entendres, very very funny. But there was always one or two gay characters in those. In those shows, in those movies. So yeah, I think I'm just working on the idea at the moment. It's going to be a nightmare to film, but and the other thing thinking about is what sort of soundtrack I'm going to have, and so I won't give away too much, but I can see you laughing, so
Yes,
it started already.
topic. Because when you talk about skinheads, you understand that they have so many prejudices, and
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
talk about gay, you're like, come on, like how can one person be both?
yeah.
Skinhead and
It,
the prejudice, and like
it's
with.
it's a bit of a contradiction. I mean, the original skinheads in this country, they weren't prejudiced, right? They used to listen to a lot of reggae music at the time, and I think that racist thing came a little bit later. But when you think you're walking along the street and two big booted skinhead come towards you, think they're going to attack you, but you find it's almost like a contradiction, Amina, because they've got this very effeminate side to them. So there's almost like a bit of a dichotomy there, and I think that in itself is quite funny. They may try and beat me up afterwards, but who cares? But there is a bit of a contradiction in there, and one or two people I've known over the years who. When I was younger, I've known a few, and they turned out to be gay, So they like showing their profiles off, and it was just an idea that I got that I thought I could elaborate on. Whether I ever finalise it or not is an idea, but going to America that recently has been a bit exhausting, so I think I'm going to have a little bit of a break first
Well,
from it.
theater of the absurd, like Samuel Beck. Like now, like when I hear like the idea of your next film, it's also like a theater of the absurd because
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it is absurd itself.
yeah,
So it's like how is it
yeah.
possible? So it will be interesting to
Well,
watch and to see your point of view on this
yeah. Well, I
topic.
think the absurd is. I think the absurd. I love the absurd. I think the
I,
absurd is funnier than anything. He can't be like Frank Zappa said. Anything that can't be understood is fascinating. So, I think humor is a difficult concept to define, but I think a lot of it is the absurdity of it all. The absurdity. And I think I mentioned before that within humour there is always some cruelty, because if you go back to Laurel and Hardy, when the brick falls on it, the cliches, you do get those cliches in there, and another brick falls on his head. So there's quite a few cliches in there, but I think the absurd side of it is a big part of it.
yeah, actually, I saw a wonderful production, Waiting for Godot, starring Sir Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart on Broadway. It was like a
Well,
massive, and I also saw another production, No Man's Land, with them as well, and I loved both. But of course, like Theater of the Absurd is one of my favorites.
yeah, yeah,
So that's why
great.
always watch another production of Gato or
Yeah,
any West Coast plays. So can't wait to see
yeah.
next work. And my last question is, what did you feel when you saw your film at the Chinese theater? Describe your emotion.
The Chinese theatre, or the one in New York? Uh,
No, the
oh,
Hollywood
the Hollywood
in the heart.
one. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it was. I watched a few movies first, but it was. How can I say? There was a few people in the audience, and it was. I didn't know how they're going to react, but it's almost thinking, how did I get here? How did I get this to Hollywood? And I realised it wasn't impossible. Sometimes the impossible can be done. It can happen, and in Hollywood, I think. I saw Barbie and one or two other films. I thought the new Napoleon was very good. I saw that on the way back from the States, but I think they're always looking for new ideas. You can have a multi-million dollar movie. Like some years ago, I was on the Thunderbirds. We did a reincarnation of Jerry Anderson's Thunderbirds, which wasn't too successful. But I don't think you can put a price on ideas. I think if it's an original idea, that it's something that doesn't come with a price. It's something that comes from you, from within, and takes time to develop. But as having my movie in Hollywood, it was great. It's a trip I'll always remember, and no one can take that memory. And surrounded by some wonderful people there and other directors. And again, it was an interactive film situation, slightly different to the one in New York, but still very, very good.
Yeah, each is unique, and you must have a screening in Hollywood, in the heart of Hollywood,
Yeah,
on Hollywood
yeah,
Boulevard
yeah,
itself. And that
yeah,
theater is so beautiful,
yeah,
and architect it's just
yeah.
incredible. I love it, like visually, like
You've been in there. You've been in there, yeah.
to
I
have
I think they do the Oscars. I think they do the Oscars
that.
there, I believe. And There used to be a cartoon series called The Pink Panther where the boy used to pull up in the Pink Panther mobile, and I think that was the Sid Gauman Chinese Theatre where that was filmed, I believe. So, but yeah, I think it's one of Hollywood's oldest cinemas, and it's every one the four or five cinemas in there. They're all very very good. But as I say, it was a DCP. I think you have 25 frames a second, what it is. Yeah, I had to have it converted for that one, and yeah, always nice to go back to Hollywood.
And actually, right now, like an idea came to my mind that the theater's colors are green and red, and the colors are used in the ceiling of the St. Mary's Church in the movie you did
All right.
in Chigwell. Yes,
Yeah, St Mary's Church. Yeah,
the combination is so beautiful, and like the
yeah,
glass. I mean, everything was so gorgeous, and it was the first time when I saw how they actually ring the bell. How they make this sound. In your film.
yeah.
Because you hear the sound of the ring. Outside of church, but I mean, I've never seen how this sound.
Yeah. It's done. It's done with coordination in St Mary's Church. It's. I mean, English people aren't that religious, but I mean, I'm Church of England background, but like most English, I think only 1% of English people go to church, so we're not the most religious people. But I think we do value the artistic side of churches, and as you mentioned, the bell ringing in the belfry that is a coordinate. It's done manually by guys just pulling the strings manually in a systematic way to get that ringing. I'd say so. I think there is some musical art to it. I think the bells are slightly different tonality or something like, or a different interval, something like that. So churches in themselves, I think, are artistic places, and it depends what sort of church. I think if you go to Westminster, if you're ever in London, go to Westminster Abbey, and it's more like a museum than a cathedral because there's so Charles Darwin's body. Cromwell was buried in there originally before he was dug up by Charles II, I think it was. He dug him up and hung his corpse for killing his father. They used to he chopped his father's head off. I think you'd want to do that after doing that, And so Westminster Cathedral Westminster Abbey is the Protestant one, and Westminster Cathedral is the Catholic one. And the Catholic one has a confession booth in it, which they don't do in the Church of England. But within the Church of England, there is Low Anglican and High Anglican, and High Anglican is almost Catholic in that they have incense in the church. The only difference being that Catholic priests can't get married, but High Anglican priests can get married. Protestant vicars, as we call them, they can get married and do what anyone else does. But at one time, we were all Catholics in this country until the Reformation under King Henry VIII. But it's important to me because on my grandmother's side, they were French Huguenots, French Protestants who came to this country around the Cromwellian period. So I imagine coming here to escape Catholic persecution in Cromwell's Britain was a safe haven for us. And if you go into the East End of London, if you go into Brick Lane, there are still some Huguenot churches down there, and one of the streets down there is Fernier Street, which is Alice Cooper's original name, Fernier. So I think Alice Cooper is also of Huguenot descent as well, from Detroit in Michigan.
that's
Yeah,
interesting. And the way people, give confessions in the movies quite often, but I've never seen where the sound comes from before, and that's why that moment is so thing. And thanks for capturing it. It's really, really
so
interesting to see,
okay,
like the inner
thanks.
view, how the church
Yeah,
works nowadays,
yeah.
straight from the director, and it's amazing. So thank you so much
Yeah.
for your
Yeah.
documentary.
Some of them I think are still automatic. Some of them are recorded, pre-recorded. But Chigwell is, as I say, he's done
Mhm.
manually. So yeah, maybe you'll come to the quaint English village of Chigwell sometime.
I
Yeah, put it
love.
back on the map.
Well,
Yeah,
after watching your movie, I mean, I want to go out and to breathe, to see the nature, be in the nature in the
yeah,
park. I've loved.
It's a bit, Essex is very underrated. I mean, Essex, I think in the 90s it was associated with drugs and they made some very nasty films about Essex boys. But I think most of that was due to drugs. But I think William Wordsworth, no, it was Constable and Turner did their painting in Essex. And I think William, who's it said, the jacuzzi of the soul? William Wordsworth, the poet, said Essex was the jacuzzi of the soul. So Essex is a very beautiful county, and West Essex is hillier than the eastern counties of Essex. And by the way, Essex has got nothing to do with sex, like Sussex and Essex. It just means Saxon. It means Eastern Saxon. People think you're talking about sex all the time. It's too much Saxon in Wessex. But it comes from the Sayax, which was if you look at the Essex County Council symbol, there were three Sayaxes, and the Sayax was the Anglo-Saxon weapon, where the blade was on the opposite side to normal. So there is an antiquate sort of linkage between Essex and northern Germany. So those three Sayaxes represent Lower Saxony, Upper Saxony, and Saxony-Anhalt. So not many English people want to realise that our people originally came from Germany, 700, 800 years ago. So, but then Shakespeare came along and the Norman Conquest, and Shakespeare was everything to the English language. It's thanks so much.
Yes, and he came after Mid English, right?
He came after Mid-English. I mean, to say I can't really understand. I mean, even if I look at some Swedish, I can understand one or two words that you can see are thrown in there. But English really is a hybrid language. It's got so many origins, and I think when we talk about poetry, and I think the origins are rich. It gives its richness. Shakespeare came after Chaucer, and the Norman Conquest came in 1066. And although apparently only a few thousand Normans settled in the UK, but they left a legacy on our language, and also, but they kept the Anglo-Saxon legal system. But apparently only a few thousand of them settled here, but they did incorporate quite a few French words like squirrel into the English language. So English became a fusion language between Old Norse and Saxon, with one or two Celtic words thrown in, but hardly any Celtic at all. Most of it, I think about 45% of it is Germanic. My granddad spent 6 years in a prison camp in Germany, and he used to say the similarity between German words and English words. There was Wasser, Unter, and Man, all these words. If you come to Essex, some of the names here are still German. We've got a place up the road here called Saffron Walden. So Walden in German meaning forest, I believe. So I imagine they grew a lot of saffron there at one time.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
And I also want to say that the meal of a rabbit in your film is so sweet.
Oh yeah, yeah. The rabbit, yeah.
Central Park,
Yeah. No shortage of rabbits there. No short. Some of them lived in the tombstones. So they go under the tombstone, and I suppose it protects them from the road. Some of them are quite tame, to be quite honest. But yeah, beautiful creatures. And if you ever come, there's just by Chigwell, there's a Metropolitan Police sports ground where anyone can use it, and you can go in there for a coffee or a drink, or they have meals in there. So that's just as you come up the hill into Chigwell, the old Chigwell village itself. Yeah. So an interesting place, and thank you for your questions on the subject. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for your wonderful work, and keep making movies and submit them to our festival. And thank you so much for joining me here on IG Live. It was a pleasure talking to you. I've learned so much from
Likewise.
you.
Thank
And
you.
Adam, hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Amina. Thanks again for the opportunity, and yeah, great to see you again.
Yes,
Sorry about the technical hitch. Yeah.
no problem at all. Best wishes always, and look forward to seeing your new documentaries. And
Right. Great
bye.
stuff. Bye for now. Bye now.